Right, you've probably heard of this absolute mug, seeing as it's been keeping everyone indoors for the past year or so. Well, though it seems to be getting a bit better for a lot of countries at the moment, that's not the case for all of them. Asian countries suffering more than expected, and the Latin American countries aren't doing much better, and they don't look to be for the foreseeable future. Even some European countries still aren't doing great, and this has a lot of serious repercussions. But that's not really my channel. Serious is a scary subject. A smaller repercussion of the old pandemic stuff though is the fact that countries that are strict with borders or more highly affected, they aren't going to be hosting any F1 races anytime soon. And by that, I mean probably this year. Already, for one, Canada got cancelled and replaced by Turkey, which has now also been cancelled and now replaced by a second Austrian Grand Prix. I mean, that's enough cancellations to make Logan Paul proud. Well, let's turn our attention to further down the year now in the calendar, where I can see a Japanese Grand Prix, United States Grand Prix, Mexican Grand Prix and Brazilian Grand Prix all lined up next to each other. Aside from the US, I can see all of these countries cancelling or postponing in the case of Japan. We'll have to keep an eye on the Olympics there first. But even if just Mexico and Brazil cancel, well, this means that there are 2 spaces open which kind of have to be filled, with a few races in the American side of the world. Canada might be ready for one at that point, but that still leaves us with 1 left, and it also brings us to the title very nicely. Will there be 2 United States Grand Prix in 2021? Most likely. That's it. Thanks for watching. Well, that might be the title answered, but let's ask ourselves, where? Where can we run it? COTA again? Simple. No, we don't take the easy way out. Why not a different track? What are our options? Well, we have a few to choose from, some more believable than others. Our first option is to bring forward Miami Gardens a year. It's certainly an interesting track, though it does look a bit, well, meh. It certainly looks like a Tilke special car parade track with only DRS overtake zones. Hopefully with the new regulations it might be more interesting, but with the 2021 cars, nah. Oh, and it's also not ready yet, which is a bit of an issue. But from the new, we should look back at the old tracks that have held F1 in the past. Caesar's Palace Car Park? No, stupidest track in F1. What about Phoenix? Was hated back then, will be hated now. Long Beach? It's a Formula E track really. Detroit? America, stop with the street circuits please. Riverside? Hasn't existed in 30 years. Right, we've covered the ones that kind of were non-starters, now let's get on to the bit more viable ones. Watkins Glen hosted F1 between 1961 and 1980, a track with a lot of history. IndyCar has raced there in recent years too, and it is a gorgeous track, with tricky turns, fast straights and that wonderful S's section. There is one minor problem: safety. I think Watkins Glen might need a few adjustments to it to allow F1 to race there, with it being a Grade 2 circuit. Bigger runoffs, better barrier walls, more facilities would be an awful lot for just 1 year. I'm gonna have to say a slightly disheartened no here. No. And before I get your hopes up with the next track, it suffers the same issues of safety and Grade 2-ness as Watkins Glen, but it still needs a good mention. That is everyone's favourite track that appears on all the racing games. Sebring hosted F1 once in 1959, the first ever United States Grand Prix nonetheless, though it looked a lot different then. Now it gets most of its love in endurance racing, with the 12 hours of Sebring the main event here. It's a real fun track, though not really suited to F1 these days at all. We can hope though that one day a track like this can get the investment to allow F1 to return to the home of the United States Grand Prix, but that is not today. Right, there's one track that is legally allowed to host F1 races that hasn't been mentioned yet. The host of the United States Grand Prix between 2000 and 2007, a track that 4 current F1 drivers have already raced on in an F1 car. Indianapolis. The first F1 race there set a record for live attendance at the time, with 250,000 people in the stands. IndyCar, the premier open wheel racing series in the United States, is literally named after it. Seems a perfect place for the second venue in the US this year. So why would F1 not do it? Well, have you heard of the 2005 United States Grand Prix? Pretty well known, but if not, I will give you a little rundown of probably F1's most embarrassing moment. So we start in a pretty weird place. as F1 used to not have one set tyre manufacturer for everyone. And for this race we started off with teams on the Michelin tyres and teams on the Bridgestone tyres. It seems all very unimportant, but you'll see in a minute. Indianapolis is a banked oval, which doesn't work with F1 cars. Physicists can explain that more, but go with me here. But the track people knew that already, and they only used one banked turn with a nice squiggly proper European style actual track in the middle of the oval. That kind of wasn't enough though, and it seems Michelin forgot to factor in the whole banked ass high speed corner that would generate loads of load on the left rear tyre when making them. Kinda not smart. In practice, 2 drivers' tyres gave way going through that corner, already not good, and Michelin supplied 7 of the 10 teams on the grid at this point. Michelin and the teams affected wanted to slow the cars through the use of a chicane, which the FIA turned around and said, well, you Melons should have made better tyres, we're not doing shit. The Bridgestone teams also jumped in on the meeting, so now the whole gang was here, apart from Ferrari, the lazy buggers. The Michelin teams asked if they could back them on a chicane through turn 13, and the Bridgestone guys just turned around and said, well, that's your problem lads, have fun. Then it gets even more dramatic because the Michelin team principals devised a plan to run a non-championship race outside the FIA's authority, even going so far as to hire a new race director and safety car driver. The FIA quickly put a stop to that though, with the teams told that if that happened, they'd probably not be allowed to race in the US ever again. So we got to the race, and all cars went out on their formation lap, the drivers trundling around the circuit until after rounding turn 12, the cars of McLaren, Red Bull, Williams, BAR, Toyota, Renault and Sauber all pulled in, leaving just 6 drivers on the starting grid. The crowd was more than a bit miffed at this, and this absolute joke of a race actually went ahead. Just 2 years later would be the last F1 saw of Indianapolis, thanks majorly to this spectacle. After that farce, then why should F1 return? Well, now we have a single tyre manufacturer, and we already feature a track with higher levels of banking on the calendar now, with Zandvoort. With the new Miami Gardens taking up a second United States slot on the calendar from next season, Indy deserves a proper race, a chance to show itself for what it can be, before it is wedged behind the new age fast street circuits of Tilke's F1 dream. Come on F1, we can forgive and move forward. Give the American home of speed a final chance, a true send-off for the first ever United States Oval Speedway. Bring us the 2021 Indy Grand Prix. Thank you guys for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will be seeing you in the next video where I should be fixing tracks. Bye!